Good afternoon, and welcome to the North Carolina Humanities North Carolina Stories Luncheon. I am Sherry Paula Watkins at the North Carolina Humanities, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. As I walked around the room this morning, it was nice to see many familiar faces and meet a lot of new friends. I'm honored that you took time today out of your busy schedule and traveled all the way from many corners of the state to gather with us to celebrate the humanities in North Carolina and the hardworking community change makers who make it a wonderful place to live and thrive. As we start today's program, you'll notice you have a menu card in front of you, and on the other side is a brief overview of today's program. You will hear from North Carolina Humanities trustees, alumni, staff, partners, and friends who will share stories from our North Carolina Reads statewide book club program, our newest fellowship program, and our Smithsonian traveling exhibit. And later, we will have the distinct honor of presenting Dr. Jacquelyn Dowd Hall and Dr. Robert Korstad with our 2024 John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities. I'd like to pause here and thank our staff at the North Carolina Humanities who are dedicated to developing excellent humanities programs and working with communities across our state. As I call your name, raise your hand. Melissa Giblin, Director of our North Carolina Center for the Book. And she's outside, of course, working. Rusty Reynolds, our Finance and Operations Administrator. Caitlin Patton Stanley, our Director of Grants and Compliance. And Melanie Moore Richardson, who is our Development and Communications Manager and helped organize today's luncheon celebration. Melanie. I'd like to officially start our program today by making a toast to our Caldwell Award recipients. Please join me and raise your glasses to today's celebration and to Dr. Hall and Dr. Korstad. Congratulations. Cheers. Jacquelyn and Bob, we look forward to hearing from you later in the program during a dynamic conversation about your work in Southern Oral Histories, led by our board chair, Mike Wakeford. Jacquelyn and Bob, we are very honored for you to be here with your guests and friends and family. As we begin our program today, please go ahead and start enjoying your meal. We're glad that you are here today with us to share in our luncheon celebration of the humanities across North Carolina. Since we first started presenting this award over 30 years ago in 1990, we have recognized 35 Caldwell laureates, including Margaret Bauer, who now serves as one of our board trustees and is the longtime editor of North Carolina Literary Review. Margaret, could you raise your hand so that we can recognize you? Thank you for being here, Margaret. At this time, I want to recognize two North Carolina giants and Caldwell Award laureates who passed away since last year's ceremony, Edwin Graves Wilson and Fred Chappell. These community champions exemplify the public humanities in our state, and we do grieve their loss. For today's program, I want to thank our generous sponsors, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Charlotte Museum of History, Muse Winston-Salem, the North Carolina Literary Review, the North Carolina Writers Network, and the Southern Oral History Program. Can we please give our sponsors a round of applause? Please visit our tables in the back and grab a gift bag before you leave. You will find information about our sponsors, a magazine courtesy of North Carolina Literary Review, and a QR code to an online archive of Bob and Jacquelyn's work that was curated by the Southern Oral History Program. Next, I want to thank our Board of Trustees and alumni who are in attendance today and have been instrumental in planning today's event. I'm fortunate to work with such dedicated leaders who live and work across the state and who bring their expertise and passion to our mission of enhancing the cultural lives of North Carolinians. Bill Mansfield, Brian Kahn, Cecilia Thompson, Della Pollock, Diane Robertson, Georgianne Eubanks, Hannah Dela Cruz Abrams, Jessica Harden, Curry Bird, Laura Williams, Les High, Liliana Windorf, Lorna Ricotta, Margaret Bauer, Mike Wakeford, Nancy Fields, Rebecca Godwin, Renee Alexander Kraft, Sarah Hahn, Tassie Little, Todd Wright. If I have called your name, or if perhaps I missed you coming in, could you please raise your hand so that we can recognize your service to North Carolina Humanities? With these types of leaders having been at work and now at work and still working for us in different ways, there's no way that we cannot be effective to North Carolina. We are fueled by stories. We see it as one of life's most valuable pursuits to connect people with the stories, histories, and cultures of our state, whether they be beloved tales or a forgotten individual's life story. In our work, we bring subject matter experts, storytellers, and community members together to learn about and discuss stories that are important to them. The resulting conversations strengthen connections between humans, expand understanding, respect, and empathy, and enrich the lives of those involved. North Carolina is headquartered here in Charlotte, but we have hands in nearly all 100 counties in North Carolina. We are a community resource. Across the state, we are connecting people to discuss ideas and perspectives, connecting organizations to the resources of our national affiliate partners, and connecting people to books and the stories told within them. At this time, I want to bring our Board of Trustees Vice Chair, Brian Kahn, to the stage to share about one of our programs that grew out of a need to share and talk about more stories. North Carolina Reads. Brian?
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Kahn. I wear many hats, including Vice Chair of the North Carolina Humanities. I am Office Managing Partner at my law firm here in Charlotte called McGuire Woods. I write a comedy show that makes fun of Charlotte called Charlotte Squawks. Seriously, you all should. It opens next week, or now a couple weeks from now. And I have 4 teenage boys. So in all my spare time, I love to read. I love to read books. And here's why. As all of you all know, because you're here, books help us explore new perspectives. We visit foreign lands from our couches. We connect with other people through shared reading experiences. There's nothing better than finishing a good book and telling 5, 10, 20 of your friends, hey, you got to read this too. Now, that desire to connect people using books was the impetus behind North Carolina Reads' statewide program book club. And when COVID hit, we had to reimagine how we could connect with people safely doing a virtual book club, and that seemed like the perfect fit for the time. Now in its 3rd year, we've given away over 10,000 free books and other reading resources. That's pretty amazing. Now, these materials are often distributed to under-resourced community spaces like libraries and to folks who are living in rural communities. Time and time again, we hear from people saying, having this book in my library meant that I could participate in this program, and without it, I wouldn't have been able to. Others say, these books helped me gain a new perspective. I learned about some piece of history, usually North Carolina history, that I wasn't familiar with. And it's because of testimonies like these that we keep offering North Carolina Reads. Now, North Carolina Reads is a free virtual book club featuring 5 books a year that explore issues of racial, social, and gender equity in the history and culture of North Carolina. The program invites readers to read our selected books and then join North Carolina Humanities for monthly discussions to hear directly from the authors and topic experts. you have an opportunity to ask questions of these people on the panel. And in each discussion, the readers and the participants are encouraged to take what they learn back to their community and host their own book discussions. Now, since our last luncheon in October, I'm proud to announce that North Carolina Reads won a National Excellence Award from the Federation of State Humanities Council for its statewide impact and dedication to sharing stories of American diversity. We actually brought the award here. It's on that blue table back in the corner. It's pretty awesome. On your way out, please check it out. It's fantastic. This award is the result of, first and foremost, our staff and all of their incredible hard work, our community partners who participate in this program, excellent authors and topic experts who've been part of panels and have written the books that we're talking about, investors, including the National Endowment for the Humanities, the North Carolina Center for the Book, an affiliated Library of Congress, the State Library of North Carolina, and readers across the state who still believe in the power of the book. And again, go check out the award back there. The program costs nothing to be involved. Get the book any way you want, register online, and enjoy the program. We hope that all of you, if you haven't already, please join us for the next one. I think we already have 150 people signed up for the online program, which is in about how many weeks? It's a couple weeks away? 1 week away. So more information in the back there. And all of the books from this year are on that back table on the left side of the table. In fact, you'll find that we have a couple of book giveaways, and 2 recently selected books were books that were selected for the Library of Congress National Book Festival. Now, I know that we also have a few North Carolina Reads featured authors here today, and some of the topic experts with us. So can you please raise your hands so we can thank you for being part of the North Carolina Reads? There we go. North Carolinians around the state, I hope you will help consider supporting this reading initiative by donating. The more support we have for this program, the more books we can put in the hands of readers. I'm pleased to announce that my law firm, McGuire Woods, has donated $5,000 in support of North Carolina Reads, but every single little bit you have could help. Please see our staff at the registration tables or scan a QR code at your table. I think it's right there in the center there. You can give 1 book to 1 reader for just $20, and I hope that you will. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. Now I want to invite my fellow trustee, Dr. Rebecca Godwin, to the stage, who's going to read us a few poems as lunch is being served. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Rebecca Godwin, Professor of English Emerita at Barton College in Wilson. Today we celebrate community and the stories we tell to form and strengthen it. Mainly, we do think of people when we envision communal ties, but if we consider the place our bodies live in and the food that sustains them, we realize that the natural world is our community too. The writer Robert Morgan, roaming woods and fields in the Blue Ridge Mountains while growing up on a family farm, embraced the company of birds, insects, weeds, apple trees, drops of rain, as well as stories of his ancestors that he tells in poetry and fiction. I'll share with you 3 poems from his 2011 collection, Terroir, that illustrate his fellowship with nature and his habit of seeing the sacred in the ordinary. I think they show us how to do the same, and maybe nature communicates instructions for our human communities as well. The first poem is titled Ironweed. There is a shade of purple in this flower near summer's end that makes you proud to be alive in such a world. and thrilled to know the gift of sight. It seems a color sent from memory or dream. In fields, along old trails, at pasture edge, the ironweed bears its vivid tint, profoundest violet, a note from farthest star and deepest time, the glow of sacred royalty and timbre of eternity, right here beside a dried up stream. Translation. Where trees grow thick and tall in the untroubled wild, the older ones are not allowed to fall, but break and lean into the arms of neighbors, shedding bark and limbs and bleaching silver and gradually sinking piece by piece into the bank of rotting leaves and logs to be absorbed by next of kin and feed the roots of soaring youth, to fade invisibly into the shady floor in their translation to the future. And as one. I remember walking in a field so young the black-eyed Susans stared me in the face, the air so bright that every flick of grass was clear and leaves seemed magnified. The flowers stood tall and swayed, the daisies, Queen Anne's lace, the Susans, yarrow, thrilled the day and kept me company, all level as a yard of water, and made me feel as one of their exploding, fierce community. May we be as welcoming. At this time, I invite the band back up to play a few tunes while we enjoy our food and our conversation. Thank you to Andy Page and Ron Brindle for playing for us today. And I also extend a big thank you to Todd Wright, who is North Carolina Humanities Resource Development Committee Chair and our saxophone player today. That's important. Thank you all for being here. Yeah. And yay for jazz musicians.
But good afternoon. We are so pleased that you could join us today. And again, as you continue eating, I'll keep going through our next section. My name is Caitlin Patton Stanley, and I'm the Director of Grants and Compliance for North Carolina Humanities. For more than 50 years, North Carolina Humanities has been a resource for our state, supporting meaningful humanities projects. In my position on staff, I have the pleasure of working with community organizations, and I remain inspired and impressed by the incredible array of work happening in North Carolina. Today, we are grateful to have some of our grantees with us. So if you're a current or a former grantee, if you could raise your hand so we can recognize you for your amazing work. Thank you for all that you do to help our communities thrive. So if you saw someone just now with your hand up, maybe they're at your table or around the room, we do encourage you to talk to them, learn more about their work. And if this has inspired you to talk about your own project, feel free to find me afterwards, and we can talk about how North Carolina Humanities can help. This year, North Carolina Humanities offered a new funding opportunity to support humanities scholarship. We offered a summer fellowship program to faculty and staff at North Carolina-based institutions of higher education, and we received an overwhelming response from faculty at colleges working on diverse and innovative areas of humanities research. Today, I have the distinct honor of publicly announcing our inaugural fellows and their projects. So on the screen, you'll see a list of our 9 fellows, and here's the projects that they are working on this summer. An Islamic perspective on animal extinction and food justice, Rich from the Sea, indigenous wrecking and maritime trade in the Atlantic world, Southern women's environmental writing, an article and essay collection, Boyd Cabin, freedom and family in 19th and 20th century Western North Carolina, The Invention of Silence, remaking our understanding of sound through deaf poetics. The China-US relationship and oil trade during the early 20th century. 1 million likes, understanding cartoons in a digital age. El corazón del árbol de Navidad, the heart of the Christmas tree. And Trans Stories Crossing Borders, how to grow together in translation. Let's give a round of applause for our fellows. Please keep up to date with their projects and work by visiting our website. We thank them all for the important work that they are doing, and we look forward to seeing what comes next. And so now I'll draw your attention back to the screen and introduce a video about our Museum on Main Street program. For over a decade, North Carolina Humanities has worked with the Smithsonian to bring high-quality exhibits to small towns and rural areas in North Carolina. Each exhibit is unique and a great way to learn more about our state. With support and funding from North Carolina Humanities, our tour venues create programs and catalyze conversations that showcase local history and stories. In the video you're about to see, you'll hear about our current Smithsonian exhibition, Voices and Votes, Democracy in America. This year, the exhibit can be seen at the following communities: at the Iredell County Public Library in Statesville, at the Southwest Brunswick Branch Library in Carolina Shores, at the Cumberland County Public Library in Fayetteville, at Alamance Community College in Graham, at Appalachian State University in Boone, and at the Henderson County Public Library in Hendersonville. Some of our current and past Smithsonian exhibit partners are also here today. So if you can please raise your hand so that we can thank you for your partnership and for making this rich storytelling possible. So Iredell County Public Library is not only the first stop on our tour this year, but they also received a project grant in 2022 for their work documenting and preserving the historic Green Street Cemetery. Directly after this video, I invite Amanda Kane, Assistant Director of Iredell County Public Library, and Shelley Taylor, Library Program Specialist, to the stage to share stories from these two experiences. And now please enjoy this video. Our democracy demands action, reaction, vision, and revision. Voices and Votes, Democracy in America is a Smithsonian Institution traveling exhibition that explores voting, citizenship, and our democratic system of government across generations. From revolution and suffrage to civil rights and casting ballots, everyone in every community is a part of this evolving story, the story of democracy in America.
I love having an impact on the community and making a difference and connecting people to books and connecting people to people. I grew up in the DC area and I love the Smithsonian. I've spent a lot of time there as a child and an adult. So I think it's just something very valuable to be able to share with our community.
We will definitely be engaging with our schools and hope to bring lots of kids in to see the exhibit. And we are already working with some of our community partners to bring in some speakers and some local history programs related to the exhibit.
Museum on Main Street is a collaboration between the Smithsonian and North Carolina Humanities that brings exhibitions and public programs to small town communities and residents of rural North Carolina. North Carolina Humanities has proudly partnered with the Smithsonian for over a decade to bring 7 unique Smithsonian exhibitions to over 30 different museums, community colleges, libraries, and historic sites across our state.
This is the Smithsonian. This brings what we do in our department, the history department, alive. We want our students to see setting up an exhibit, what it takes to do that. And then we want to bring the whole community in. This brings the community on campus.
If we don't know what story we're part of and where our community comes from, we can't know where it's going or how we want it to look in the future. It's our history and it helps make who we are. So I want people to learn about it and know it. I'm really excited the Smithsonian's coming to Cumberland County because the Smithsonian, normally people are like, oh, that's in DC. And I'm just really excited about it being here since the Smithsonian will be in their own backyard. They can just drive downtown and before they get lunch, come in and tour the exhibit.
Libraries are an awesome institution that brings the community together, that shares knowledge, that allows people to find entertainment and education for all ages, all in one building.
We are so excited to bring Voices and Votes, Democracy in America to North Carolina at this time. North Carolina Humanities helps people gain a deeper understanding of themselves and each other by creating opportunities to explore and reflect on the past, present, and the future. We hope you will visit the Smithsonian exhibition in a community near you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Kane, and I am the Assistant Director of the Iredell County Public Library. With me today is Shelley Taylor. She's the library's Local History Program Specialist. We were asked to come today to share with you all our story of partnership and collaboration with North Carolina Humanities. One of the library's first successful partnerships with North Carolina Humanities occurred in 2021 when we received funding to digitize our microfilm collection that contains newspapers that are in the public domain. This grant opportunity enabled us to send our microfilm to the Crowley Company in Maryland to have it professionally scanned and digitized. This digitization has allowed the library to link our newspaper repository to our public-facing website, and patrons from all over the world can now access this information that was previously only available in-house. Our latest collaboration with North Carolina Humanities is the Voices and Votes Democracy in America exhibit. We applied for the opportunity to host the exhibit because it was an opportunity for the library to bring the Smithsonian to Statesville. While Iredell County is diverse in nature, with the northern end of the county being more rural and agricultural, and the southern end much more suburban and not far from Charlotte, there are still many who will never have the opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C., and see the high-quality national resources that the Smithsonian has to offer. For those who cannot make that trip, sometimes books are the way they travel and experience other cultures and ideas. So hosting this exhibit was an incredible opportunity for us to meet our library patrons where they are, which is one of our strategic goals. As of yesterday, we have had a little over 1,800 visitors to come through the exhibit. And in conjunction with the exhibit, we've hosted a book club with the book What You Need to Know About Voting and Why by Kim Wheel. Also, each person who registered for the book club received a swag bag with a copy of the book, a notebook and pen set, and an Iredell County shaped keychain that are all branded with the Voices and Votes and the Iredell County Public Library logos. We've also hosted a Q&A session with our County Board of Elections and a program about newspapers and politics in Iredell County. We are also offering 2 opportunities for citizens of the county to come in and get a photo ID for voting. These 2 sessions will take place during a time outside of the Board of Elections' normal business hours. While the Voices and Votes exhibit is our most current collaboration with North Carolina Humanities, it is not the one that has garnered the most attention. In 2022, the library applied for and was awarded funding to conduct a ground-penetrating radar survey of the Green Street Cemetery. Shelley was an instrumental part of that project, so I will let her give you more information about the cemetery and introduce her as the library's mistress of cemeteries.
Thank you. I am Shelley Taylor. I am the local history librarian at the Iredell County Public Library, and she's not kidding. Mistressofcemeteries.com is my domain. I bought it. It's both my professional and personal passion to research and preserve cemeteries of historic value. Established in 1885, the Green Street Cemetery is the oldest African-American burial ground in Statesville, and it's the largest cemetery of formerly enslaved people in Iredell County. We received a $20,000 grant from North Carolina Humanities to perform a ground-penetrating radar study of the cemetery. Initially, we wanted to know how many people were buried there. There were only 151 visible markers in the 3.38-acre lot, but we knew about 700 names based on information submitted from various sources to find a grave. After the project, GPR technology revealed that there are 2,224 souls buried in this sacred ground, and research has resulted in the discovery of a total of 1,485 names, and we hope that that number will grow in the years to come. We also uncovered partial or full headstones thanks to the radar detecting objects below the ground surface. Some of these stones had not seen the light of day for decades. No longer are these people just numbers. They have stories, and through our grant, we were able to share those stories with our community. About 20% of those buried here were born prior to 1865, lived life enslaved, but died as free men and women who left strong legacies. With the grant funds, we were also able to purchase steel bolts that were installed at every burial, leaving a visual marker for each person. The community came out and helped install these markers, and after the project, the Statesville branch of the NAACP continued to work in the cemetery and cleaned every single stone. The NAACP also plans to fund repairs of broken stones, having pledged an additional $10,000 towards this endeavor. This project was about more than just data and statistics. This project was about remembering the past, preserving history, and preparing for a better future. We are beyond grateful to North Carolina Humanities for the humbling opportunity to be a part of this incredible experience. We would also like to take a moment to recognize one of our partners in the Green Street Project. Here in the audience today is Todd Scott. He is the president of the Statesville branch of the NAACP, and we would not have been, yes, we would not have been nearly successful as we were with this project if we did not have his constant advocacy, support, and collaboration, and that of the NAACP. So thank you, Todd.
Having personally managed 3 North Carolina Humanities funded projects in my time at the Iredell County Public Library, I can attest to the phenomenal job that Caitlin and Melanie do on a daily basis. The Voices and Votes exhibit is a huge undertaking, and they have been with us every step of the way, from the application process to the coordination of delivery to the actual physical setup of the exhibit at the library and all the press and marketing that goes along with it. We were also extremely honored to have North Carolina Humanities Executive Director Sherry Paula Watkins at our ribbon cutting for the exhibit. And we are proud to partner with North Carolina Humanities each and every time we have the opportunity, and look forward to our next collaboration.
Well, it certainly takes dedicated people to lead humanities work in 2024. Thank you, Amanda and Shelley, for sharing your stories. And on behalf of the board, thank you for what you do. We thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to partner with you. My name is Todd Wright, and I teach at Appalachian State University in the School of Music there. And I'm a board member here at North Carolina Humanities. At North Carolina Humanities, we annually recognize important community leaders with our John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities. For over 30 years, we have presented this award to distinguished individuals whose achievements and contributions have strengthened the educational, cultural, and civic life of North Carolinians. This year, North Carolina Humanities Board of Trustees will present the award to 2 deserving individuals. Dr. Jacquelyn Dowd Hall and Dr. Robert Korstad, who many of you know as Bob, have created and collected so many meaningful stories. And it is because of their work that we honor them with our Caldwell Award. Jacquelyn and Bob, we thank you so much for your longtime commitment to the humanities and for inspiring a new generation of historians. To introduce Jacquelyn and Bob, we've invited Dr. Renee Alexander Kraft to join us here today. Renee is a professor at UNC Chapel Hill and the interim director of the Southern Oral History program at UNC, which Jacquelyn founded. Additionally, she is a North Carolina Humanities Board trustee alum. As we move to the Caldwell ceremony portion of today's program, I invite Renee, Sherry Paula, and Mike to the stage.
Good afternoon. I'm telling you, you do a little bit of it all, don't you? You were playing earlier and now they... So I can't come with all of that. But I could not be, more thrilled to be back in my hometown with an organization that is the crown of both the Queen City and the state, celebrating two of North Carolina's brightest and most precious gems. Dr. Jacquelyn Dowd Hall and Dr. Robert Korstad are brilliant scholars, teachers, deep listeners, and gifted storytellers, committed to gathering and preserving complex stories that help us understand the differential relationships ordinary, extraordinary people have to work, to each other, and to the South in the context of their everyday lives. Dr. Jacquelyn Dowd Hall is the Julia Cherry Sparrow Professor Emeritus at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and founding director of the Southern Oral History Program. She's also a longtime leading advocate and champion of the program. This is a program that has a wonderful and distinguished history at UNC. She is past president of the Organization of American Historians and the Southern Historical Association and founding president of the Labor and Working Class History Association. Her prize-winning publications include her 3 books, Revolt Against Chivalry, Jesse Daniels' Ames and the Women's Campaign Against Lynching, Sisters and Rebels, A Struggle for the Soul of America, and Like a Family, The Making of a Southern Cotton Mill World, which she co-authored with her wonderful partner and Caldwell Award co-recipient, Robert R. Korstad, alongside James L. Lalutis, Mary Murphy, and Luann Jones. I'm going to take a pause for a second. I wanted to do this without my glasses because that way, when I look up at you, you're not blurry, but life says no. Her award-winning essays include The Long Civil Rights Movement and the Political Uses of the Past, which was published in the Journal of American History. In 1999, she was awarded a National Humanities Medal for her efforts to deepen the nation's engagement with the humanities by, quote, recording history through the lives of ordinary people, and in doing so, for making history. She was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2011, and in 2022 received the Christopher Crittenden Memorial Award from the North Carolina Literary and Historical Association for her contributions to the preservation of North Carolina history. Dr. Robert Korstad is Professor Emeritus of Public Policy and History at Duke University, which I also often call the university down the street about 13 miles away from UNC. Dr. Korstad is a native North Carolinian and earned his BA and PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He has also earned an MA from the New School for Social Research. He is the author of the award-winning book, Civil Rights Unionism, Tobacco Workers and the Struggle for Democracy in the Mid-20th Century South. That book has become a primer for labor and community activists and is the subject of a jazz opera. The jazz opera is called Love Songs from the Liberation Wars, the 1940s Tobacco Worker Struggle, and a comic book about the African American women involved in the Union. His most recent books use history to address contemporary policy issues. He co-authored with James Lalutis Fragile Democracy, The Struggle Over Race and Voting Rights in North Carolina, and To Right These Wrongs, the North Carolina Fund and the Battle to End Poverty and Inequity in 1960s America. Dr. Korstad has a long engagement with oral history. He worked with and is an ongoing champion of the Southern Oral History Program at Chapel Hill, initiated and co-directed the oral history project called Behind the Veil: African American Life in the Jim Crow South, and co-edited a book titled Remembering Jim Crow: African Americans Talk About Life in the Segregated South. I want to take one moment and thank SOHP co-director Philip McDonald, who curated a resource guide to their work, which you can find in your little swag bags, and it gives a great overview of Jacquelyn and Bob's work. So, Jacquelyn and Bob's politics of listening with curiosity and care, their critical attention to history as it unfolds around us, between us and because of us, and their sustained commitment to the transformative power of a good story told well, are just a few of the reasons we've gathered here today to honor them. So please join me in welcoming Jacquelyn and Bob to the stage.
What an honor, Jacquelyn and Bob. Jacquelyn, please step forward. Dr. Jacquelyn Dowd Hall, it is my honor on behalf of North Carolina Humanities to present to you the 2024 John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities. Bob, please step forward. Dr. Robert Korstad, it is my honor on behalf of North Carolina Humanities to present to you the 2024 John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities. Can we now please join me congratulating Bob and Jacquelyn, our 2024 Caldwell laureates.
That looks really good. I noticed that I'm the only one without a medal at this table now. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Wakeford, current chair of the Board of Trustees at North Carolina Humanities, and it is a super thrill as a child of Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Durham, but also as a current resident and historian of the tobacco town known as Winston-Salem, a city that is at the center of a tobacco and textile town, I should say, at the center of so much of your work. It's a real honor to be up here with you today. So before we proceed, though, we need to acknowledge and dig into the elephant in the room, which is Bob. You're a Dookie, Jacquelyn, Carolina. How has it all worked out?
Thanks, Mike. Well, it's been fabulous. It's been really great. You know, we both have a lot of friends at both places and colleagues. We've been able to work with Duke and UNC graduate students over the years. We've lived in Chapel Hill, so Jacquelyn could walk to work, and I only had 9 miles, so that was nice. I'm a double Tar Heel, as Renee said, and lucky for me, for many years I was able to use Jacquelyn's basketball tickets to UNC men's basketball tickets with my colleague Bob Conrad, who's also a North Carolina grad and a Duke professor too. So it's been a good ride.
Good to hear. Well, let's get down to business. So my first question for you is, family and kin networks loom large in your work. So I wonder if you might start by reflecting about how your early lives and your families connect or not to who you've become and your historical sympathies and so on.
Yeah, so I'll start. So I grew up in Greensboro. My parents ran a landscape nursery. But before that, they'd been active in the labor in the early civil rights movements and struggles in North Carolina. My father was from northern Minnesota and got drafted out of graduate school in World War II and was assigned to an Army hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. And there he met my mother, who was a social worker and whose family had lived for many generations in the Low Country. The photo you saw before was their marriage and my mother's extended family. They got involved as volunteers with a strike involving tobacco workers at American Tobacco Company. This was a strike where the civil rights anthem, "We Shall Overcome," was first sung on the picket line. So it's a very important story there. After the war, my father went to work for the union with the food and tobacco workers and ended up as the Southeast Regional Director living in Winston-Salem. I'll say more about that in just a little bit, but after the union came under attack in the early 1950s, he and my mother decided to stay in North Carolina and set up a landscape business. So I grew up along with my brother, who's David, who's sitting here in the front row, in a kind of weird atmosphere of radical values wrapped in a more suburban normalcy. So it was an interesting upbringing.
Well, I grew up in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, population 5,000 on a good day. And both sides of my family had been there for generations. My mother was a girl who who lived in books, a valedictorian who married way too young, a handsome, bullheaded boy. This is a picture of my mother's side of the family, the warm, sprawling, maternal side of the family. The occasion is the 70th birthday of my delightful snuff-dipping great-grandmother and her 8 children and their descendants. That's me on the floor, the youngest generation. I was the first in the family to go to college, to Rhodes College in Memphis. And just as I was graduating, my mother took my 4 younger brothers and sisters and left my father. My boyfriend and I rented a truck, went to Pauls Valley, and moved the whole family to Memphis, where my mother worked as a secretary and I got a job as a Delta Airlines flight attendant. We all lived together in a little duplex, tried to pay off her debts and save money so I could go to graduate school. And I took from all this, among other things, an oldest child's fierce sense of responsibility and solidarity, and also a natural-born resistance to domineering institutions and domineering men. So that's a little bit of the story.
Well, maybe you could continue by talking a little bit about the path that each of you that took each of you into your work as historians.
Well, I fell into history mainly because of the history I was living through. I was at Rhodes during the Civil Rights Movement. I went to graduate school at Columbia in 1966, just as 2 things were happening: the anti-war movement And the women's movement were turning students' lives upside down. And at the same time, whole new fields of history were emerging. Women's history, working class history, African American history. And most of what I learned in graduate school, most of what I've done in my life, I learned not in class, but from students and young faculty who were searching for new ways of doing history and ways of doing history that rhymed with the social movements of the time. I fell into oral history in the 70s. I was living in Atlanta by then, trying to write a dissertation, emphasis on trying, and mostly working with a group of young civil rights veterans in an organization called the Institute for Southern Studies. And we saw oral history as a way of creating the sources that you could use to do these new kinds of history. History from the bottom up, history of people who don't usually leave behind written records. And so I joined hands with two of the women in this group, and we set out to interview the Southern progressives of the 1930s and 40s. And our goal was to learn from an earlier generation of Southerners who had tried to create a better South. This is me with Leah Wise and Sue Thrasher. Well, while we were trying in vain to raise money to do this oral history project, but doing it anyway, at that very same moment, unbeknownst to me, an eminent Southern historian in Chapel Hill got a substantial grant from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, a great supporter of all good things in this state, and to found what they hoped would be the South's first major oral history program. He had in mind a bright young man to lead this program, but when that bright young man took another job, they hired me. Now, this was crazy. It would never happen today, but there I was in 1973, still trying to write a dissertation, but a tenure-track professor at UNC, sitting in a crummy little office in Hamilton Hall with a typewriter, trying to figure out how to start a major oral history program from scratch.
My route to becoming a historian was similar, but more circuitous. I was a political science major at UNC, and then, like many of my friends, I thought I'd go to law school. But the politics of the 60s put me on quite a different path. I got a master's degree at the New School for Social Research, where my classmates were mostly refugees from the political battles of the anti-war and student movements. We were studying political economy, economic history, and really trying to figure out how the past helped explain the world that we were trying to change. I wrote a thesis on labor in the Southern tobacco industry, manufacturing industry that became the beginnings of my work, civil rights unionism. And a few years later, I got a fellowship at the Oral History Project at Duke and got myself deeply immersed in archival research and doing oral history. Soon I found myself at a PhD program at UNC, and that's where the real learning began. This is me practicing to be a college professor. I knew very I thought that's what I should look like. I never did accomplish that.
Thank you for that. So you co-authored Like a Family together in 1987. And I know a few of the other co-authors are here today, Luann Jones in particular. Can you tell us about what made you want to dive into this topic? What was your research process like, and what did you learn from that project?
Well, Luann, could you please raise your hand? so great that you could be here. I wish that more of our co-authors could have been here, but we do have two honorary co-authors with us. Diane Lalutis, who was and is married to Jim Lalutis, one of our co-authors, Diane was with us all the way. And Amy Glass, if you would raise your hand, please, who was my right-hand person when we were writing this book. Amy did everything that we did, plus make the parties fun and make the trains run on time. And if anybody is in need of one of these, she's a font of embarrassing stories about me. At the Oral History Program's recent 50th anniversary celebration, she told me that when I interviewed her for a job in 1982, I looked her in the eye and said, "Can you spell? I hope you can spell, because I can't." Now, I could try to deny that in other stories, but I don't think it would do me any good. So I mentioned earlier that the new labor history was emerging when I was in graduate school, but it had hardly made a dent in the study of the South. I realized that we had a golden opportunity. The economic sea change that had drawn people off of the farms and into the factories in New England and England had happened in the South within living memory. And yet, at that moment in the 70s, the traditional industries of the South's Industrial Revolution, furniture, textiles, tobacco, were dying. The mill villages were being sold off. If we could act fast, we could interview the workers and owners and others who built those industries and built those villages before their stories were irretrievably lost. So we got a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, gathered together a bunch of student interviews, and set out to build a collection of what turned out to be more than 350 interviews. We drew those interviews from 7 interviewing sites, one of which was Charlotte. So we've got, for that reason and many others, lots and lots of sources on Charlotte history. This is an excerpt. I thought I would play an excerpt from one of those interviews. This is a woman named Eula McGill. She went to work in, she was born in 1911, went to work in a textile mill, and then spent her life as one of the few women organizers for the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union, traveling the South. She basically lived out of motels most of her adult life. And when I asked her when she became involved in the labor movement, she said, "Well, I was about 7 years old." And I was like, well, really? And it turned out that her father was a miner and a secret union man, i.e. a believer in the union, but he wouldn't let anybody know this. Her mother couldn't read or write, but she had a keen sense of justice and interest in history and politics, and she started taking Eula McGill to labor protests and picket lines when she was 7 or 8 years old. So in this, I like this excerpt because it has this sort of meta quality. I'm here interviewing her in order to preserve the stories of the labor struggles of the past. She's telling me about how she did that decades before, spent her life doing that. And also, I thought that what she has to say is a message that we can all use in this discouraging times that we're living in.
What do you think workers' education should accomplish?
Well, I think it should accomplish so many times at the seminars that I've been to, more or less doesn't give enough labor background history to make a person feel that when talking to workers are the potential leaders of the rank and file workers in the shop, which I hate to use that word rank and file because I don't feel like I'm nothing but a rank and filer. But some people, they want to make the distinction between the paid representatives on the staff and what we call rank and filers. And but for the people who are work in the shop and are the local union leaders, I think in recruiting people who you want to be the leaders in an organizing campaign, you should be prepared, or the people who are talking to people should be prepared. It helps them in talking to workers to help them to understand the philosophy behind the labor movement. And it helps them, I think it helps to give them more confidence in themselves when they're discussing the need for organization, to know something about the early struggles. And to know something about people who've tried and failed and kept trying again and kept failing maybe again and trying again over and over, so that people won't become impatient if it don't happen as fast as they want it to happen. And I think if they understand that and are able to convey that to the potential leaders who are helping to organize and to build the union in the shop, it makes them more effective. It makes them be able to talk more and to put down some of the person comes and say, well, my father was in the coal mines or in the steel mills or in the textile mills, and they tried to get a union, they got fired, and the struggle they went through. Then they think, well, what's the use putting up a fight for it, because you may fail, and then they're so afraid to try that they might fail. And so many people who did try and fail and may for a while become discouraged, if they really had the unionism in them and believed in it, they'd keep fighting for it. It's only the people who are, I think, only the people who let temporary setbacks put them down and hold them back that are, I won't say harmful, but they're the people who won't make leaders. I think you have to have the determination
Well, do you
to
try?
still believe although you fail.
So by 1982, we had finished that project and created what I think is an archive for the ages, along with our partners in the Southern Historical Collection and Wilson Library. And we could have stopped then. We were planning to stop then. But instead, a group of us got together and decided to write a book. Bob wasn't involved in that interviewing period of the project, but he arrived and got involved with us when we started to do that. I thought I would just end by reading a little. I actually forgot to bring my copy of Like a Family, but I wanted to read just a little paragraph from the introduction or the preface to the book that will just give you a sense of what it was like once this group solidified and began to and did this. Although each of us took on specific research and writing tasks, Like a Family's argument and style were shaped collectively. Collaborative writing required collaborative thinking, which in turn demanded a generosity that was at times difficult to achieve. As creatures of a society built more on hierarchy and competition than on mutuality and sharing, we inevitably had our ups and downs. But working together honed our skills and affirmed our values. By pooling our very different talents and passions, we glimpsed a past more multifaceted than any one of us searching alone could have seen. We speak in this book as historians, taking responsibility for our own analysis, while at the same time sharing authorship with hundreds of working people who speak for themselves. our hope is that readers will be touched, as we have been, by these voices in all their dignity, humor, and pain.
So when you put a book, a project or a book out into the world like this, I imagine it is unknowable exactly how the public will respond to the work. Can you talk about how people have responded in creative ways to your work?
Oh yeah, we had no idea what was going to happen with this book. We were waiting with bated breath. But it was really embraced beyond our wildest dreams by scholars who took it up and wrote a burgeoning field of Southern labor history followed this book, but which was important and great. We wanted to do that, but even more fun and exciting was how people took the book and did other things with it, took it into the outside world. And one of those was created and spearheaded by Della Pollock, who will raise her hand, please. So she and her students created a performance project based on Like a Family and took it to communities across North and South Carolina, including Charlotte, where they were at the Homestead United Methodist Church, I think. We authors traveled with them. This is a picture of a performance where a very red-headed Bob Korstad down there on the second row was traveling with them. Another really exciting was a documentary film called The Uprising of 34. And it was done by George Stoney, a Winston-Salem native, UNC grad. So Southern Humanities Councils were the first and most faithful supporters of that project. And we worked closely with George and were really thrilled that, as he put it, they used Like a Family not only as a source of facts, but also as what he called a treasured gift for dozens of witnesses who are touchingly moved to know lives like theirs have been recorded with such accuracy and thorough thoughtfulness. And the final thing I'll just mention is the Oral History Program celebrated its 25th anniversary. The Atlanta Constitution published this article about the program and about this particular interview that I had done with a woman named Nell Sigmund. She was a hosiery worker in Western North Carolina, and I was awkwardly trying to explain to her why we were barging into, doing cold calls in mill villages and working class neighborhoods and asking people to sit down and tell us about our lives, and trying to explain why we thought that lives like her were important and historically significant. She just interrupted me and said, well, you don't have to be famous for your life to be history. And so that's been our informal slogan of the Oral History Program ever since. And we have never stopped getting, wait a minute, I was skipping something. The next day after this article appeared, her daughter called the Oral History Office in tears. Her children Nell Sigmund's children had treasured the memory of their mother, and they were so thrilled to see that her life had been treasured, not only treasured by them, but had become part of history. And we, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, Jim Lelutis got an out of the blue letter from someone who had discovered his grandfather in our collection and had a whole story to tell about how that made him understand his family in a whole different way.
Great. And so after Like a Family, your work continued, and I'm just going to skip down the page a little bit here. I know that your next major project, actually, you went back to one of your earliest interviews and picked it up for a new project. Could you tell us a little about Sisters and Rebels?
Yeah, that's one of the first projects we did in the early 70s was a series of interviews with Southern women who had been writers and intellectuals and activists in the 1920s, in the period after women got the vote. And this is a picture of me interviewing Catherine Dupree Lumpkin in 1974. And she and her sisters, their stories stayed with me. I stayed in touch with them and eventually wrote a book that came out in 2019, which is about Catherine, her sisters, and their generation. These sisters had grown up in a slave-owning family, had been steeped in the cult of the lost cause. And one of the things that fascinated me about them was the way each one of them grappled across the long 20th century with that legacy, but had done so in radically different ways.
Bob?
So I learned an awful lot working on Like a Family. How to be a better writer, how to work collaboratively, how powerful and important the voices and insights of Southern working people were. When we finished Like a Family, I defended my dissertation about the same time. And in that, I'd written mostly about the rise and fall of Local 22 of the food and tobacco workers in Winston-Salem. My committee had a lot of great suggestions on how to make that better, but what they really wanted to know was what happened in the decades before 1943 that allowed these black workers to organize in opposition to a company that was fiercely anti-union. Duke professor Larry Goodwin, who's on my committee, asked the question most succinctly: what was this process of social learning that contributed to the sit-down in June 17, 1943? And so as I began pondering that question, I realized it applied not just to Winston-Salem, but more broadly to African-American communities around the South. And I talked with colleagues at Duke, William Chafe and Ray Gavins, where I'd started teaching in 1989. And we began to realize that, like Jacquelyn and her colleagues at the Southern World History Program, we had a limited time to talk with African Americans who had come of age during the Jim Crow period. We submitted a grant, once again, to the National Endowment for the Humanities, thank you, and created a project called Behind the Veil: African American Life in the Jim Crow South. We got teams of graduate students from around the country for 3 summers doing interviews in communities around the state, around the region. A lot of this work depended on the foundation that Jacquelyn and her colleagues had created in the industrialization program. We followed the life history system or method of interviewing workers, and we also had Duke students going to Chapel Hill to take classes, and we actually had some of Jacquelyn and Della's students working on our project or coming to Duke to take classes. So it was a really interesting collaboration and kind of building on that foundation. Charlotte was the first place that we did interviews. We learned a lot of lessons, including we started asking the interviewers to take, we had cameras, these kind of cameras that you sat down on a table and took a click. And we asked people to share their family photographs with us and family albums. And over a period of time, we collected thousands and thousands of images like this, most of which are online. And as I was helping doing this project, I also was expanding my work in Winston-Salem, going back to the archives, getting a better sense of what happened in during this period of social learning. And I really identified a lot of different places this took place. Some of them were failed union organizing campaigns earlier, mostly led by white workers. The black churches, I discovered, not surprisingly, were critical places of leadership development, particularly for working class women, black women. A number of the union leaders had been very active in choral groups and also on baseball teams. And that was interesting to find. And also my interviews began to really kind of reveal these long-standing stories of resistance and informal leadership among African American workers. And finally, in 2003, civil rights unionism came back. Many people came out. Many people helped make this happen, but most important was the support of Jacquelyn, and who participated in countless discussions and read way more drafts along the way than she should have. So that's kind of how I got to the end of that.
So let's, in the interest of time, Bob, we have three slides coming up, and I just want you to say a tweet length something about each of the three, and then we'll move on. This is Velma Hopkins.
Right. So she was one of the activist union leaders. Became one of the most important people in the union. She carried on her activities. She was in that picture. She was leading the first African American student in Winston-Salem to desegregate Reynolds High School. Miranda Smith was a young woman who died very suddenly in 1950, became the first African American woman to be a vice president of an international union. And then finally, Robert Black, who was the leader of the union in Winston-Salem.
As we come to a close, can you just speak for a minute about creative ways folks have responded to this work?
Well, two important things, right? Renee mentioned this. This is a comic book that a young woman artist in New York has created. This is just one slide from it, but it's like a 40-page book that tells the whole story, particularly focused on African American women. And this is the rock opera, or the jazz opera that was created called Love Songs from the Liberation Wars. A writer and songwriter created 30 original songs based on the story and music to go with it. They performed it in Washington, and we're hoping to bring it to North Carolina this fall.
Let's give them a 20-second taste of this.
Move with the music, feel the love all around. Strong enough to change the world, yeah. Strong enough to change the world. Unstoppable, unstoppable. We won't give in to you. Victory's on our side, nothing you can do. Now I'm free, I see color.
We're about to finish. Last question. As working historians and public humanities champions, but also as a married couple, can you reflect on the importance of each other's work? What is it that you admire about the other?
Oh.
Go ahead, you're first. You're first.
What I said about like a family, I would say about our marriage, that neither one of us could have done what we've done without the other.
And I'd obviously agree with that. Well, for all the right reasons. But I also think it's fortunate we had, similar jobs, but for different institutions. And although we shared a lot of day-to-day successes and frustrations, we got to work and had relationships with students and colleagues that were quite separate, and I think sources of real inspiration for us.
Yeah, I think that's right, that we're very much our separate selves, but partners to the bone.
Thank you.
Well, that's a great way to end. Thank you so much.